This is chapter 9 from Everything on a Bagel, Everything on a Waffle, Uncle Jack's idea. Before we read today, your assignment is actually to summarize what's happening before reading. So pause this video and write down at least 2 sentences describing what's going on in the book right now. You can either focus on what happened last chapter, or you can summarize in general what's happening in the book. So do that before you read this chapter. Chapter 9, Uncle Jack's idea. A few days later, they released me to convalesce at home. After spending a few more days listening to the hockey-playing ghosts, I decided to convalesce at school. It turned out that while I had been in the hospital, Uncle Jack had ended up having dinner with Miss Honeycutt, eating pear soup. Recipe to follow. He said it was many things, but a meal it wasn't. He had tried to interest her in any of several terrific investment opportunities that Cole Harbor now offered. She had tried to convince him that an eligible bachelor had many opportunities himself if he was encumbered by obligations. Uncle Jack told her that I was going to live with him no matter what. He reported this to me quite matter-of-factly when I pressured him for details. I knew he had just said this to let her down gently, but it seemed to me it only gave her a greater motivation to get rid of me. Why is she trying to get rid of her? This isn't a real question, I'm just thinking it. And indeed, no sooner had I returned to school than she called me into her office and said, "Primrose, I'm afraid you are becoming a danger to yourself. Children who have had special emotional upsets sometimes act out and need special care. Uncles are very nice, but some children need more supervision than a single working person can provide." I just sat quietly and tried to look normal. "We are going to have to look into this and, in the meantime, work with you on these issues." I didn't want to contradict her because I was afraid Miss Honeycutt would think that I was acting out, and I wasn't even sure what that was. "I trust you know what issues I'm referring to." I got the feeling that Miss Honeycutt didn't even know what issues she was talking about, that she just liked using the word issues and would use it whenever she could slip it into conversation. Certain people do get attached to certain words this way. I kind of liked solarium myself, although it did not lend itself to such easy use. "Miss Honeycutt," I asked, "do you think it would help if I had a solarium?" "A what?" Miss Honeycutt flushed all red and patchy and looked at me disbelievingly. "A solarium. It's funny you should mention that, Primrose. My mother had a solarium in her house in Kent after she divorced my father before she married the second cousin of Noodles. Dear Uncle Charles, who—" I studied all the certificates on the wall behind her, and before I knew it, she was saying, "Freedom of movement, don't you think?" I was saved from answering by the secretary, who came in muttering something to Miss Honeycutt, who walked to the door saying, "You can return to your room, Primrose. I've suggested to your teacher ways of dealing with these issues." I waited apprehensively to see how my teacher planned to deal with these issues. It turned out that they just wanted me to take the class pet guinea pig, Herman, home for weekends. "Caring for small animals instills a sense of ourselves and others," said my teacher. "I think it develops a sense of ourselves and others to care for small animals and build things, like solariums," I said. "That's the spirit," said my teacher. I didn't see how I could help having a sense of myself and others, but of course, none of us had any idea what we were talking about. It was just one of those situations where everyone involved feels compelled to say something, anything at all. The teacher gave me a few instructions about caring for Herman and tried to hand me his cage, then realized that I couldn't carry the cage and use my crutches at the same time. 2 boys who were in the cloakroom grabbing their hockey sticks and backpacks offered to carry it for me. "Why, isn't that kind of you boys?" said my teacher. She handed them the cage. It made me nervous to have them volunteer when I knew they regarded me with scorn, so I hobbled nervously behind them, wondering if they were going to play a prank on me. When we reached Uncle Jack's party, they put Herman on our kitchen table, and I expected them to turn around and leave, but they marched right into the gym, leaving me open-mouthed. It wasn't pranks they were interested in. It was hockey. As soon as the two boys had gone into the gym, more boys opened the door and came in. Most of them carried hockey sticks and pads. Occasionally, one would bark, "Hi, Primrose," or "Your uncle's cool, Primrose." "And so," I announced indignantly that night to Uncle Jack over chicken pot pies, "they marched in, without even knocking, and played hockey right here in your very own gym." "I know," said Uncle Jack, smiling, chewing, and twinkling. "Darn it, though, I wanted to tell you before they all trooped over, but I guess they were anxious to get going." He went on excitedly with food stuck in the side of his cheek like a chipmunk. He swallowed hastily. "I invited them to," he winked at me. "Great idea. Actually, I got the idea from Miss Honeycutt, more or less." "Miss Honeycutt?" I repeated blankly. "The night I had dinner with her, she said she thought you were left alone too much. I'm out selling houses. You're in the house by yourself a lot." "By myself too much?" "She thought you might be accident prone," said Uncle Jack, looking at his food and eating industriously. "She doesn't think you should be by yourself after school. I think she's afraid you're going to fall in the ocean, walk in front of buses, trip over curbs, who knows what, because you're not paying attention. She has all kinds of theories." "Theories?" I said. Uncle Jack put his knife and fork down and looked me in the eye. "You know, Primrose, there's something about sports. You can be setting fire to cats and burying them in the backyard, but as long as you're playing team sports, people think you're okay." I thought about this. Uncle Jack always has a good game plan. "I don't mind playing hockey, but those boys will never let me," I said. "Ah, that's where you're wrong," said Uncle Jack, smiling, chewing, and winking again. "I told them they could come in any time and use the gym. No sense trying to play street hockey now that the rainy season has started. We've got a gym that goes all but unused." I said that the only stipulation was that they had to find a disabled goalie, and not just disabled, one that had lost a toe. I digested this silently. "Of course, you don't have to play, Primrose," said Uncle Jack, "but if you do, there you go. You'll have a game all set up. You hardly need your crutches anymore. You can balance yourself on your goalie stick." So I waited. I sat at the Formica table all week while boys trooped in and out, waiting for them to ask me to be a goalie. Nothing. I grabbed the gym door, threw it open, and whispered hoarsely, "What about the deal you made with my Uncle Jack?" There was a breathless silence when they saw me, but only Mike Muskegon was near enough to hear me. He gave me a very sour look and said, "We got us a goalie." I looked over to the net. They certainly had. His name was Spinky Caldwater, and he was a Cambodian orphan. His mother was a single woman who wanted a child and flew to Cambodia to get him. Everybody felt sorry for Spinky, not because he was a Cambodian war orphan, or because his foot had been blown away by a landmine, but because his mother was such a twit. She made him wear a necktie everywhere. I decided to take Malamar out for a run. We went down to the docks to sit and wait for my parents.